It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, hockey fans? This is The Big Show, brought to you by Sticks.com. I'm Michael Traikos. With me, as always, is Ryan Kennedy, and pleased to have back on the program, Drew Shore. How you doing today, Drew?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be back on, and the playoffs have been amazing, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about.
Well, let's start with last night's game between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. It was a 6-1 lopsided win by Florida. They now take a commanding 3-2 series lead in this second round series. And Ryan, we spoke right after the game, and immediate reactions aside, now that you've had a night to sleep on it, what are your impressions of game 5? And much to Craig Berube's point, whether it was 6-1, whether it was 2-1, the Leafs lost. How do they go about forcing a game 7, and can they do it?
Yeah, I mean, with the hindsight of, a night of sleep and thinking about recent history, like there was a blowout in the Stanley Cup final last year, and, Florida still won in 7. So, you will have those shifts in momentum. Having said that, I mean, the Panthers are playing at such a high level right now. And I was kind of joking after Playoff Frenzy Live last night. They're like alligators, right? They just like exhaust you, and you keep turning and turning, and eventually you just kind of give up. But what we saw in the first 2 games of this series was Toronto use its speed to counteract that, to get out of their zone. And if they can get back to that, then they can at least extend the series. A guy like William Nylander, who has been pretty effective throughout the series, and he even had a breakaway in game 5.
He scores on that breakaway, and it's a different game, Ryan.
For sure, yeah. And Matthew Nyes had a great chance at the side of the net early, and it just so happened that Bobrovsky got his foot on it. But there is a path, but it's a very difficult path. Like, you basically have to play near perfect hockey.
Well, good news is for the Leafs, the game is not happening in Toronto. And I was at game 5, and I don't recall I've seen bad crowds in Toronto. Let's be honest. I saw them throw frozen waffles on the ice years ago at the Leaf players. But this was a weird one. At first they were booing, and then they were tossing jerseys on the ice. And then with like 13 and change left in the third period, with the score 6-0 for Florida, there was just like a mass of people just screaming towards the exits, trying to beat the traffic, where the final, half of the period was played in front of basically a half-empty arena. And Drew, you've been a player in the NHL. What's it like when a crowd turns on you, and can you sort of just block it out of your memory, or block it out of your, eyesight or hearing?
Yeah, well, a lot of people probably don't even remember this, but I was playing in Florida during the times where when we play Montreal or Toronto, sometimes there would be more Montreal and Toronto fans than there. So it was a home game for us, but it felt louder for them when they scored. But obviously those days are completely over in Florida, and it's an amazing atmosphere to play now. But I was shocked. I think I saw that. I mean, I think that they showed the camera of the lower bowl with about 7 minutes left in the game. And I mean, it was probably half full. And I mean, they kept showing a lot of the Toronto guys on the bench as well. And it almost looked like they looked shocked.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like, let's be honest, that Scotiabank Arena, that lower bowl is usually half full because everyone's out getting sushi and champagne rather than watching the game. But this was a little different feel. This is playoff hockey. We're watching the Dallas series, and it's just like nonstop. Everyone's just standing, cheering, waving towels. And then you go to Toronto, and it's just like apathetic. So it is kind of brutal. Obviously, a lot of the blame is now going to the core 4. Mitch Marner, no goals, no points in the last 2 games. Same thing with Austin Matthews, who's I think now gone 5 games without a goal. Ryan, the core 4 is not showing up again when the games matter the most. If the Leafs lose in game 6, are you now to the point where something drastic has to happen?
I think so. You can only do it so many times and run it back so many times before you realize that there's a structural problem. And as I said last night, like, the Panthers aren't going away. Like, Austin Matthews has not scored against the Panthers in the playoffs. And you're probably going to have to face them next year if you want to make a long run. You're going to have to face Barkov. You're going to have to face Reinhart. You're going to have to face that great defense core that probably got better this year, bringing in Seth Jones before the deadline. So it's not a matter of just kicking the can down the road. You either have to make personnel changes, or the players have to take it upon themselves to say, I need to play a different style. And I look more at Matthews in that sense because he's like 6'2", north of 200 pounds. Like, he is a big body, and we've seen him have great puck protection. We've seen him do some great forechecking and two-way play in the past. He needs to commit to getting to the center of the ice and getting that quick release off whenever he can. He can't wait for those perfect moments anymore. Like with Mitch Marner, like, he's a more slight guy. I can understand there's a bit of a problem with him getting to the middle of the ice. But having said that, there's other things he can do to create time and space for his line mates.
I think something that, the core four needs to step up, right? And I think that all the Toronto players, like, people are asking about the momentum game to game. I think that there's no way in the back of their minds they're not thinking like, hey, we won those first two games at home. We had that 2-0 lead, I think it was game 3 in Florida. Like, we could have really kind of stepped on this series. So with that being said, if you look at Toronto and Edmonton, though, they're kind of constructed very similar in terms of they're very top heavy. But now, like, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid have been good, but they haven't necessarily dominated the series against Vegas. And they just had so many other guys step up. Evander Kane's been great. Corey Perry's been great. So, the Leafs, yes, those big guys need to get going, but they also need some help, some step up from some middle guys, some bottom end guys in their lineup. And they've gotten they haven't really gotten that at all. And you look at Edmonton right now, and I don't know how many goals the two of those stars had, but they haven't lit up the Vegas series, and they just had a ton of other guys step up. So, if Toronto's top guys aren't going, and then their middle guys, they're not getting any help, it's going to be tough for them to win the series.
Yeah, Craig Berube juggled his lines for Game 5. He had David Kampf and Nick Robertson in. Robertson, true to what he's done all year, every time he gets sat down for extended period of time, he always comes back with, it seems like, his best hockey and ends up scoring. You guys foresee any other changes? Because word out of practice today is Anthony Stolarz won't be traveling with the team to Florida. So, that rules out Joseph Woll potentially coming out. But would you make any other changes, Ryan?
Maybe you put in Yarncroc for Kampf. It didn't seem like Kampf really did much.
Seems like we're shuffling around the deck chairs in the Titanic here.
It really is. Yeah, like, there isn't really an option where you can say, okay, this guy brings us an entirely different look and is going to really help us step up. I have a quick question for Drew just on this topic of, the Leafs and how things are going now, because, I always kind of joke about sports psychology where, players will always say like, oh, that's a good team over there when they're talking about like the last place team that they're facing, or like, oh, we still have a chance, stuff like that. But like, when you're in the room and the cameras are off, like, have you been on teams where you're just like, we don't have it? Like, this is not our year.
Yeah, even in those situations, you don't say that. And I don't think that's what the Toronto guys are saying. Now, they do have some of the best players in the world who are capable of winning 2 hockey games in a row. So I think if you're inside the Toronto locker room, that has to be the mindset. And I do genuinely believe that is the mindset. Like, we have to go steal 1 game in Florida, which with their top guys, they're capable of doing. Now, it's going to be super hard. But I think, like, the message and the scary thing that everyone's talking about is it's been the same movie over and over and over there. And I think that's why it was so disappointing. I actually turned on the game, I think 5 or 7 minutes late, and I looked at the shots, and it was like 14-5 in Florida's favor to start the game. And going into that game, you're Toronto, you're like, okay, this is our chance. Like, we have to get off to a good start. And it kind of snowballed, and Florida got a couple lucky bounces early in the game, and some things went well for Florida. But it was just such a disaster start for Toronto at home.
So we got a whole show to talk about, but real quick, Drew, this edition of the Florida Panthers, with Marchand, with Seth Jones, with a couple of other pieces, is it better than last year's team, you think?
I think so. And that's what, like, the best Toronto hasn't really made, looking back the last 4 or 5 years, like, I mean, Max Pacioretty's been good for parts of this series, but a lot of these teams that win bring in significant pieces. I mean, you look at what Dallas did and Jim Nill did with Mikael Granlund. Like, it's like Brad Marchand. I mean, I think they traded him for a second-round pick at the deadline. I mean, these are big-time difference makers that when, like, in playoffs, you're going to go through stretches where, like you said, I mean, Mikko Rantanen propelled the Stars for a while there, but then, like, it's tough for those guys to do it, and they're not going to be able to do it, even the best players every night. And I mean, that's what I mean. Look at Edmonton. I mean, the addition of, they didn't bring Evander Kane in, but he wasn't in their lineup all year. Corey Perry's turning 40 and still scoring goals. Connor Brown's playing well. I mean, they've just gotten tons of contributions from other guys. And Florida, credit to Bill Zito, seems like every year they keep bringing in. I mean, they have a great core and they keep adding. And so I definitely think so. And I mean, Marchand's looked great. He scored the big overtime winner, whatever game that was. And I mean, they're just tough to beat. And now Bobrovsky too. I think he stopped before Robertson scored 67 shots in a row or something. And I mean, has the ability, like he showed last year, to be the difference maker and kind of propelled them to the Stanley Cup finals. And the scary thing for Toronto is he looks back in the same, if not better form.
Yeah, Bob is back.
Bob is back.
Who else is back is Stuart Skinner's back, and a huge win for him to close out the Vegas Golden Knights in that second round series. So we've got our first of conference finalists in the Edmonton Oilers, a 1-0 overtime win. And you know, Drew, you're talking about depth scoring and who Edmonton is getting goals from these days, aside from McJesus and Draisaitl, and Kasperi Kapanen with a huge goal. How important is it, Ryan, for Edmonton to get this sort of depth scoring and not having to rely on the two-headed monster there in Edmonton?
Yeah, it's been massive. And, and Drew mentioned it, the great depth there. I would also toss in like Adam Henrique has been super crucial to their success. And then Trent Frederick, just giving them that different look, making them heavier, where you have a healthy Evander Kane and you have Frederick. That's a big difference having those two guys in the lineup versus in last year's Stanley Cup final, where Evander Kane was, essentially not there. And I do think that, what the Oilers have done, there was a really good, somebody tweeted this out this morning, that if you look at the overtime shifts for the Oilers, it was like almost even, like everybody got in. Wow. Actually, somebody I would also mention too, and this is a great pickup by the Oilers, Vasily Podkolzin, another heavy guy who is just playing his role. And, he'll give you a bit of offense, but he'll block shots. He'll get in on the forecheck. He's a big body, really kind of has reinvented himself, because it didn't work out in Vancouver for him. But those are the types of moves that really pay off and will continue to pay off as you get deeper into the playoffs, where that guys are going to try to get as much body as possible on McDavid and Draisaitl, try to wear them down. That's when those other guys need to step up. And luckily for the Oilers, they've constructed a team that it's got a lot of burly dudes now. Yeah,
I mean, the addition of Frederick, like you said, Evander Kane being back in the lineup. I mean, heavy skill is just such a commodity. And I mean, people have tried to reinvent the wheel and what wins in playoffs, but I mean, heavy skill is just year after year seems like it always wins. And so it adds such a different dynamic. Like you said, Evander Kane was playing last year, but was super banged up in the playoffs. When he's playing well, I think their playoff run 2 years ago, I think he scored 10 or 12 goals in the playoffs. So, I mean, this is a guy who scored his whole career. He can get to the net. He also can lead the game in hits. He's been phenomenal. And kind of something controversial I've thought for years is I think teams put way too much of an emphasis on draft picks. Like, I don't know why, as a GM, if you have a second and third round pick and you have a chance to win, like a third round draft pick, don't quote me on these stats, but has like a 25% chance of playing 200 games in the NHL. So it's like, if I'm a GM in the league right now and I have a legitimate chance to win, I'm doing everything I can to bring in a Brad Marchand. I mean, look at the difference maker he's been for a second round draft pick. Like, it's worth the gamble. And I think more teams should be more active in firing some of those draft picks if they're in win now mode going into the deadline.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to that is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
They needed some picks, you think?
They haven't kept a first. I think they maybe have one first round. No, I don't know if they have any of their first round picks in the past decade in their lineup or even in their organization because they flipped Braden Yeager for Rucker McGroarty. So I guess I can't remember who they picked in the first round in 2024. That might be like the only player left in their organization.
Ryan, I'm going to take Drew's side. Have you ever heard of the Vegas Golden Knights and how many first-round picks they've kept?
Also true.
Yeah, and also though, we're talking about you're able to get some of these players now for not even first-round picks. You know what I mean? Like if you look back at some of these trades, like if you can get a difference maker, now a first-round pick is obviously has a lot more higher equity or value or whatever you want to call it than some of these later round picks. But I'm talking about moving second, third, fourth, fifth round picks for some players who can be true difference makers. One thing we didn't talk about that's scary for the Toronto Maple Leafs is everyone's talking about blowing it up, but they have 2 of their top 4 or 5 players are unrestricted free agents. So
it's going to get blown up for whether they like it or not.
It could get blown up for no value, right? Like that's the scary thing. And that's what like a lot of teams going back to Calgary with, Matthew Tkachuk and a guy who was a friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer here, Johnny Gaudreau. But it's like letting these elite players walk into free agency is scary. But if you're a team who has a chance to win, you're in a tough spot. Colorado obviously made the move they did. With Mikko Rantanen, Toronto decided to keep their guys. But if they lose now and then you lose John Tavares and Mitch Marner, 2 guys who are elite players still. Tavares is getting older, but he scored 38 goals and is still a valuable player. Like that's a tough spot.
Well, Drew, there's an alternate universe where the Leafs traded Mitch Marner for Mikko Rantanen and are now on their way to the conference final because the Moose is just scoring hat trick after hat trick for the Maple Leafs. And no one is throwing jerseys on the ice and no one is leaving the rink.
Yeah, throwing hats on the ice.
You guys have been in this business. You guys have been in this business a lot longer than I have. But a player in playoffs, like dating back to I think when he was in on 15 of their 16 goals, like that has to be one of the craziest stretches of all time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, and for the record, Pittsburgh did not have a first rounder last year. Their first pick was Harrison Brunicky in the second round.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk about Dallas and the Finnish Mafia in a bit. Let's go right now to Washington, Carolina. Game 5 is tonight. It's in Carolina. This one looks like the Hurricanes are in the driver's seat to advance to the conference final. The one guy I want to talk about is Andrei Svechnikov, number 2 overall pick in 2018. I wouldn't say he's been a bust because if you look at the points, I think only Brady Tkachuk has more points in that draft class. But if you're going to redo the draft, and I guess this is a question for Ryan because he is our draft guru here, Rasmus Dahlin went number 1 overall. Tkachuk went 4th, and Quinn Hughes went 6th. So, does Svechnikov still go number 2 overall for you, Ryan, or how would you evaluate it? And, come playoff time, is it a kind of guy that you appreciate more and more?
Yeah, I'll answer the second part first. I think you do appreciate him more in the playoffs. He has 7 goals already in 8 games. Yeah. He's a big body, right? And he is that guy that can play that playoff style of hockey. If you did a redraft, you probably go Quinn Hughes number 1. And then some combination of like Dahlin and Brady Tkachuk. But I think Svechnikov would still be top 5. And it's funny. I looked at the draft class this morning. Absolutely fascinating. There were no good centers in that draft class. Like that's really rare. The first center to go was Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who didn't even play center most of that season. Like he was kind of pushed into being a pivot.
He was like a Pierre-Luc Dubois situation.
Yeah. And, like Barrett Hayton, I think was 5th overall. He's been, fine for Arizona/Utah, but, not like a number 1 with a bullet center by any stretch of the imagination. So, you got those top D guys, and then you had those very interesting power forwards like Svechnikov and Brady Tkachuk. So I think he drops a little bit, but even remembering his draft year, with the Barrie Colts, he was incredible. Like he was an absolute force. And, I think in the absence of a good center, go with a big, powerful winger that can put the puck in the net.
Drew, do you have any thoughts on Svechnikov?
Yeah, I think because of the market he plays in, he probably doesn't get the notoriety that he probably deserves. Like you guys just said, I mean, he's a guy who has 7 goals already in the playoffs. And then going back to, like I said, about teams trying to reinvent the wheel, it's like big, heavy forwards who can score in the playoffs are tough to find. So I think that he's a guy who's definitely, I think, a little bit underrated just in terms of probably the market that he plays in terms of the media talking about him. But he's had a great playoffs, and credit to Carolina. Like, they really have kind of a stranglehold on this series, and I wouldn't be surprised if they put it away tonight at home.
You think it's a matchup difference between them and Washington, where it's just, Washington just can't play that style of game that Carolina's bringing?
I think so. I mean, Carolina just plays so fast. They rim every single puck. They send the offside winger out of the zone every single time, and it almost catches teams on their heels a little bit. And I think that the speed at which they play at is causing a little bit of problems for Washington. And Carolina also as a building is a really tough place to play in. Like, that's something else that a lot of people don't talk about in the league is like, I mean, it's like almost a football atmosphere where a 7:00 game, there might be a 2 p.m. tailgate that's like just buzzing. So once that crowd gets behind them, and they've played great at home, and they've always kind of played great at home over the last couple of years. And Rod Brendamore spent a year with them as one of the most well-liked guys in all of hockey. So I think that makes him a pretty easy team to cheer for.
Okay, Ryan, say if it's Carolina, Florida in the conference final, let's just move ahead there. How you handicapping the series? Who do you think's got the edge?
I would give the edge to Florida, but not like a tremendous edge, because as Drew pointed out, like, Carolina plays really fast, and Florida, they're not the fastest team in the world, and I'm convinced some of their big guys have some sort of injuries right now that they're gutting through, as everybody does in the playoffs. But I think you can kind of see it with some guys. But I do think that Carolina's, like, I could see it going 7 easily, especially the way they're handling Washington.
All right, let's go to Winnipeg, Dallas again. This one, Game 5 is tonight. It's in Winnipeg, which Connor Hellebuck has to be very happy about, because his home versus road splits have just been out of this world. Like, it's Jekyll and Hyde worthy. Drew, you ever see anything like this where a goalie just completely, or even a player, a skater, is so different on the road versus at home?
I mean, I think this might be the most extreme case we've ever seen. I mean, a guy who's a Vezina winner who's playing this well at home. But I just think that Dallas is just too much for them. I think that, like we talked about, I think like the moves Jim Nill made at the deadline, the complementary pieces they have, the heavy skill they have throughout their lineup, they just added a top, whatever you want to call him, 20 defenseman back into their lineup who hasn't been playing. Jason Robertson is a guy who missed a lot of playoffs, and I think has probably come back in a little bit slower, but I have no doubt that he probably gets going at some point. And Dallas is just a great team that's really well constructed. That seems like it's going to probably be too much for them.
Real quick, Ryan Heiskanen, obviously we're all high on Heiskanen. He's not as flashy as Cale Makar or even Quinn Hughes, but I'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't consider him a top 5, if not a top 3 defenseman in the league. How much has his, he's only been 1 game, but just getting him back, is it almost like, now it's completely over because you got the Heiskanen back then?
I think that it's basically over. Like, I could see Winnipeg winning, at home, and then Dallas finishing off, in Game 6. But with Heiskanen, like, his impact is twofold. Like, not only are you getting one of the best defensemen in the league who's amazing at transitioning the puck up the ice and just carrying the puck up the ice, and he's so smart and he can play in all situations, but the amount of minutes that he can take on means that it takes pressure off the rest of your D-core. And, those guys have done fantastic or did fantastic in his absence. And now you think about, how well Thomas Harley is playing and Esa Lindell and that whole crew. Now they don't have to do as much. So as the playoffs are going on and guys are getting more tired, all of a sudden you're getting this advantage of getting a guy in Heiskanen that will happily play like 27, 28 minutes a night for you. And he's having an impact further down your lineup where he's eating up minutes that you couldn't account for as much when he was out of the lineup.
Nice. All right, let's go around the league here. Adam Foote was named the next head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, obviously replacing Rick Tocchet, who's moving over to Philadelphia. We'll talk about Tocchet in a bit, but this is Adam Foote's first career head coaching job. Obviously, he was the associate coach with the Canucks, and apparently well liked by Quinn Hughes. So, whether that tips the scales and keeps Hughes in Vancouver rather than joining his two younger brothers in New Jersey is yet to be seen. But like or dislike, Drew, what do you think of Adam Foote? Shifting over from associate to head coach.
I mean, I've known Adam for a long time. He actually coached minor hockey in Denver. He coached my youngest brother, and I know his boy. Baker, yeah, I know his boys. So I've known Adam for a long, long time, and he was actually still playing when I just kind of first started entering pro hockey. So he was super helpful to me. But I think that his lack of head coaching experience is going to be offset by just his ability to kind of drag guys into the fight with him. And I think that he's going to be a guy who all of the players really want to win for. And that's not necessarily the case for every coach in the league. There's certain coaches who have that ability and others who don't. So I have no doubt that I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to play very hard for him next season. So I think it's a good move.
Interesting. Ryan, you got any thoughts there? What do you like it or dislike it? You think they should have went outside the organization?
I like it because when you think about Adam Foote, particularly in his playing days, you think about the experience that he has. The Stanley Cups that he won, the players that he played with, the organizations that he played with. He can bring a lot of experience and know-how just from that. I like that he's a first-time coach. We've done a lot of recycling in the NHL lately, and I think it is good to give a guy who has been around a long time and has accomplished a lot, both as a player and, behind the bench, give him his first crack. The fact that he's tight with Quinn Hughes is certainly great for Vancouver. The only speed bump I would see is sometimes, and Drew, you would have a better sense of this than I would, but you get that sort of good cop, bad cop thing with the head coach and the associate coach. And, when that associate coach takes on the head coaching role, he kind of has to sometimes flip. So I don't know if that's going to be a factor or
be a little awkward.
It can be. But I mean, if it's Adam Foote, and if he has to be the bad guy, it's like he's pretty intimidating just as a human being. Like, he's a big guy. So maybe that won't be a problem. But that would be the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, that relationship is definitely going to change. I mean, even with a guy like Quinn Hughes, you know what I mean? As an assistant coach, when you're running the D-core, you can kind of be a little bit more friendly, buddy than I'm sure he's going to be as a head coach. But like you said, that was such a good point. Like, I mean, his career resume is insane. I mean, Olympic gold medals, like some of the teams he played with in Colorado had, like, looking back pre-salary cap era, had like 10 Hall of Famers on it. So this is a guy who hasn't necessarily been a head coach at the NHL level, but has played at and played with some of the best players to ever play the game, and is also a very smart hockey mind. So I'm pretty confident that he'll figure it out. But with that being said, I still think like he's going to have a lot of work to do because that roster is not great. And I mean, as we know, like, you can be the smartest coach in the world with a bad roster in the NHL and you're not going to be very successful. So he's definitely going to have his hands full in terms of that.
Lots of drama there in Vancouver. One guy doesn't have to deal with that drama anymore. Well, we'll see if there's new drama where he's going. But Rick Tocchet going to the Flyers, replacing, I guess the main head coach there was John Tortorella before he left before the season was done. What do we think of Rick Tocchet as a coach? Can he do what Torts had done, I guess, more than a year ago, which was almost get that Flyers team, almost snuck him into a playoff spot? What do we think about Tocchet there, Drew?
I mean, I loved it. It seemed like a natural fit from day one. Like you said, Tortorella kind of has seemed like a great coach to kind of come in and reset a culture, and then it almost like it was time for him to pass it off. And I think that Tocchet seemed like a great fit from day one, and I think it was a good move.
So here's what's interesting to me. I was trying to think about what impact Tocchet could have, and it occurred to me that the Philadelphia Flyers roster right now is kind of similar to the rosters that Tocchet had when he was in Arizona. In 2019-20, they made the playoffs. Their top four scorers were all 23 years old or younger. right? They
Oh.
Schmaltz, Keller, Garland, and Dvorak, and then Phil Kessel was fifth. I think he was like 31 at the time. Now you look at the Flyers, and some of their best players are still very young. Obviously, Mitch Koff, coming off a very nice rookie campaign. But, apart from him, like Tyson Forster is still young. Like Owen Tippett's a bit older now, but not like super old. He's probably still in his mid-20s, I would think, unless I'm getting old and just forget, because I remember when Owen Tippett was drafted. But I think, and the thing about that team is they didn't score at all. Like, they were a defensive team. They had an amazing penalty kill. They were great in terms of goals against. I think they were top 10 in the NHL. Now, the only difference is that Arizona team had some pretty good goaltending. They had Darcy Kemper and Aiden Hill, and then Antti Ranta was there as well, whereas Philly right now has the worst goaltending in the NHL. So that might trip things up, but I would say at least Tocchet has been in this situation before, where he's got a lot of young guys that are on their way up, and he does have some veterans that can still help. And then, of course, we have the whole summer for free agency. But I think he could make them, potentially a wild card team if he can get his system and his structure in right away.
If he can turn Michkov or help develop him into a 40-goal scorer next season, that might even be more impressive and more important than getting the Flyers into a playoff spot next year, in my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah, just because of where they're at. But that Metro is wide open. Who knows? Maybe someone in the Metro is going to take a flyer on Jonathan Toews. Reports are that, he's still trying to make a comeback. I think he doesn't want to go out on – I think he wants to go out on his own terms. I think no player wants to be – trying to make a comeback and, injuries or why they went out. I think everyone wants to see or have what we saw with Marc-Andre Fleury, and you have your sort of, going away party tour and do it that way. So agree or disagree. Will Jonathan Toews land a spot with an NHL team next season? And bonus points if you can name a team that you think should take him on.
I think the answer is yes. I think that, growing up, he was like the guy I looked up to. Like, as a young centerman, he was like as good of a two-way centerman as there was in the league. Obviously had a ton of health stuff and has been away from the game for a long time, but I don't see him. You mentioned kind of the Flyers. Like, I want to see Jonathan Toews. I mean, he's not going to sign, I don't think, for a huge number. It's kind of going to be a what do you have left deal, but I would love to see him in a big market on a contender. And I think that's also where he'll thrive, because he's been away from the game for so long, so I'm not necessarily sure what type of, I don't know if we'll see the offensive numbers that we've seen in the past, but at worst, he's going to be a very reliable two-way player who can at least play against the other team's top lines. So I think he's a huge value add. And if I was a GM he wasn't coming back this year, but you throw him on the Colorado Avalanche or the Toronto Maple Leafs or someone like that. I think he's still going to have the ability to impact the game. And for hockey, let's put him in a big market on a contender. It would be great for the game.
Right. I also agree. It's funny, Drew, when you were talking, I was like, oh, can you imagine Florida loses Sam Bennett to free agency and signs Jonathan Toews?
Yeah, it's crazy how some of these teams just seem to have the game figured out. I could see that happening, right? You know what I mean? It's like Sam Bennett. Or Tampa Bay. And then he goes there. And like you said, his ability to take hard minutes away at worst from some of their elite players, I think would definitely still be there. I think that, he's a guy who I wouldn't be surprised if he had a good offensive season, but I think that at worst, he's a guy who's going to be able to eat minutes and play against the other team's top lines just because of how smart he is.
Yeah. The other route I was looking at was, and I do believe he'll come back, Chicago or Winnipeg. And obviously Chicago's not a contender, but that's where he played his whole career. And it would be so important for Connor Bedard to have a center like Jonathan Toews to take away tough matchups from while Bedard still figures out the NHL. And then obviously Toews is from Winnipeg, so there would be a lot of comfort there for him. He could play in front of his family. And the Jets are certainly a contender right now, and he could slot in a depth position. But those are the two that came to mind for me.
Listen, if Chicago ends up getting Jonathan Toews as their big free agent this summer, Connor Bedard might as well ask for a trade, because it's come on, man, give me some players, some young players that I could do stuff with. How about Pittsburgh, guys? Like, old team, get older. Come on. Let's keep it going.
I mean, it would be great for hockey if he somehow came back and like the old crew ran it back one more time and like found a way. But I don't see Pittsburgh being a fit. I think he's like you mentioned Florida and Tampa. Like those would be the two teams. And I mean, I could see Colorado making a huge push for him as well. Yeah. Colorado, since Nazem Kadri left, like hasn't really been able to find like a huge supporting role for those top guys. So I could see him sliding in there. But yeah, I mean, it's great for the game. And he was a guy I looked up to growing up. So happy that he's doing better and he's getting back.
Yeah.
Right. Listen up, hockey fans. The Big Show is presented by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on hockey sticks when you can get pro-level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's STIX.com. Head over and gear up. That being said, Ryan, what time do we have?
I believe it's rapid fire time, my friend.
All right, let's start with you. I got a James Hagen question. This guy is a Long Island native, and I know you don't have him as your number one consensus pick going into the draft, but with the Islanders picking number one, should the fact that Higgins is a Long Island native influence the Islanders, who, let's not forget, lost John Tavares to free agency and have sort of a difficult time attracting free agents? Should they make Higgins their number one pick to appease the fans?
No, that should not be the reason. Like, if they believe that James Higgins is the best player in the draft, then go for it. They do have the luxury of, a very good number one center in Matt Barzal when he's healthy.
When he's the center.
Yeah, when he's the center. But don't do it just based on geography, because that would be way too much pressure on a kid that, still needs time to grow and get stronger and should definitely play another year at Boston College before he even considers coming to the NHL. But I mean, he is an elite talent, but I don't see them passing over Schaefer and even Michael Misa, who's a very similar center, but bigger and stronger. Just because Higgins happens to be local.
Hey, listen, we're not talking about a guy who's supposed to go in the second round that we're going to pick first overall, Ryan. Like, Higgins is still in that mix, right? And what do you think, Drew? Like, should that influence it? Because, last time I checked, Higgins didn't grow up with, wearing Maple Leafs pajamas here and sleeping in like a bed sheet that's full of Maple Leafs.
I got to agree with Ryan here. I think that I wanted to take the other side, but I think he's right on this one. If they shouldn't take him, they should take him if they think he's the best player. And not necessarily if they think he's the best player, but if they think he's going to be the best player in 5 to 7 years, which I haven't watched a ton of this draft class, which I know is Ryan's wheelhouse. But if they think he's right there in that mix, sure. Like maybe it adds a little bit, but if they don't think he's the best player, you can't take him in that spot. And I think that, it's funny because it's like, I feel like the Jack Eichel numbers, Ryan, like from like a lot of the people, is like hurting this kid. Like he had a pretty good season at Boston College, but a lot of people are looking at the numbers that Eichel put up kind of in the same situation. And I almost feel like it's like, oh, well, he didn't dominate as much as Eichel did, but credit to a lot of the people who do the draft stuff, because comparing guys in different leagues is just so hard from a developmental standpoint. I mean, I even think like you watch an OHL game versus a college hockey game, it's a much different game, right? So you put him in a different environment there where he's playing against 16, 17-year-olds, like who knows how dominant he would be. And I think that that's what makes kind of the whole draft process very difficult.
For sure. And I mean, the comparison that's even tougher for him is Macklin Celebrini, who is basically, because Eichel's a big guy, Celebrini's very strong, but he's only a bit bigger than Higgins. But Celebrini had way better numbers, and he did not have Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault as his wingers most of the season. So that one is a bit tougher for Higgins, but at the same time, it's like he's not competing against Celebrini. He's competing against Misa. He's competing against Anton Frondel, and to a lesser extent, Porter Martone, who's a winger.
All right, let's talk offer sheets. Evan Bouchard and Matthew Nyes are available to be offer sheeted come July 1. If you are a GM, who would you rather give 10, 9, $8 million contract offer sheet to?
I'd give it to Matthew Nyes. And I mean, Bouchard he's one of those players that like I don't think there's too many players in the league that have the ability to play as well and as poorly as he does in certain spots on the ice, which makes him like a very difficult kind of like his next contract will be very interesting from not only his agent side, but also the team side, because it's like, I mean, he's made some of these plays in playoffs that have really kind of kept them alive. And then he's also made some pretty poor plays in the playoffs. And so, I mean, his ability is to make high-end plays and also not high-end plays. That gap is very wide for him. Matthew Knies is a guy who's a power forward, as we've talked about, these guys who have the ability to score goals and play heavy are what wins you in playoffs, like the Svechnikovs, the Rantanens, even the Evander Kanes of the world. So I would probably take Matthew Knies, especially with how young he is and how new he is in his career, because I only see him as a guy who's going to continue to get better. But defensemen who can put up that many points and score goals like that are tough to find as well.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that Knies is younger and is only going to get better, I think makes him a better value for an offer sheet, especially because it's an offer sheet, you kind of have to overpay because you're trying to put the original team in a spot where they can't afford to keep that guy. So, if Bouchard was worth like around, like 9 or 10, somebody might have to go 11 over 7 years to actually get him. And it's like, what's he going to look like at the end of that contract versus Matthew Knies, who will still be sort of in his prime at the end of a possible offer sheet.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I mean, this offer sheet concept and rule has been around for so long, but it almost felt like it was an unwritten rule in the NHL where teams and general managers weren't really taking advantage of it until the last couple of years. And then we've obviously seen it, which is great for not only the players, because I mean, it helps them get paid and get what they're deserved, but it's also like, it'll be interesting to see how teams start. I mean, St. Louis did a good job of it. I mean, they put Edmonton in a tough spot and got 2 really high-end players for really didn't have to give up that much. So I think more teams are going to get more aggressive using this. And I mean, I think it's good for the game.
All right, real quick. Would you rather have Florida's Finns or Dallas's Finnish Mafia, Drew?
Oof, that's tough. I always feel like Gustav Forsling gets put into, he's Swedish, right? Like I always feel like he gets lumped into like the European Florida squad. I'd probably take Dallas's now, but I mean, they're both elite cores. And I mean, I'd probably pick Dallas now though.
Yeah. For fun, I will go Florida because Barkov and Lundell are both centers. But I mean, it's kind of funny that basically half the Finnish national team for the Olympics is going to be on 2 teams.
Yeah, 25% of the Finns in the playoffs all play for Dallas, which is insane. Wow. I think it's like 20 and then 20% for Florida.
Yeah, Florida's
not a whole lot of players coming out of that country, and yet they're all like amazing.
It was funny too, because like when Rantanen got traded to Carolina, everyone thought like the Aho and Kotkaniemi, like the Finnish connection was going to keep him there. Then that obviously doesn't work out well, and now he goes to even a bigger Finnish Mafia in Dallas. So it's funny how it works.
All right, Marner or Matthews, who's been more to blame for this year's playoff failure, Ryan?
Matthews.
Ooh,
keep it super short.
Yeah.
It's so tough because, like I was saying, it's their whole roster.
They're so terrible.
Their whole roster. I mean, Matthews. It's funny too that some of the standards, like both of those guys, need to step up if they want to have any chance to win. But it's like I was looking at it, like Matthews isn't scoring, but I mean, he does have. I think he's still operating right at a point a game in playoffs, and it's just so funny how elite some of these guys, like the standard that we expect from them, and they deserve that standard with what they're getting paid and their ability to dominate games. But I mean, I think not only is it like their top end guys deserve the blame, but their core, like they need a second or third line player to step up here if they want to have any chance to win the series.
Yeah, Marner has 12 points in 11 games, but come on, the last 2 games are the most important. He has a big old goose egg, so I'm not buying it. I'm staying on that narrative. These guys are chokers when it matters. Final question: will a Canadian team, and this, Drew, please be kind to us, okay? Will a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup this year?
No, they will not. The drought will continue. I think the Florida Panthers or the Dallas Stars are going to win the Stanley Cup. I actually think Dallas is going to find a way to win the cup. Someone that like Jake Ottinger's play hasn't really been talked about a lot, but I mean, he had stretches during that Colorado series, especially game 6, where Colorado ended up winning anyway. But I mean, this guy made 20 grade A saves in the second period of that game. And I feel like his play has kind of, been under the radar a little bit just in terms of how well he's played and like the level that he's capable of playing at. And obviously the Bob is back narrative is fully deserved as well. But Bobrovsky Ottinger final in net's going to be very competitive.
Ooh. I think it could happen because I think Edmonton could do it, but we shall see.
Yeah, I'm saying Edmonton over Florida. It's a rematch bowl.
The
Here we go.
revenge.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see if we even have hockey this weekend, because a lot of these series are going to get wrapped up. So obviously come back to thehockeynews.com for all the action. We're doing playoff frenzy lives after every playoff game. It's live and it's immediately after the buzzer. For Drew Shore and Ryan Kennedy, I'm Michael Traikos. This was The Big Show. We'll see you next time at the rink.